Hey everyone, today we're looking at interventionist supply side policies. So we're going to see how they work and also some examples that will be useful for you to know. Okay, so the main idea of supply side policies is to increase the potential output of the economy. This is shown by shifting LRAS to the right, like that, or the entire Keynesian aggregate supply curve to the right. This differs from demand-side policies that we've seen like fiscal and monetary policies, which are primarily concerned with adjusting aggregate demand to minimize the harmful fluctuations. So we get that smoother look to our business cycle. Okay, there are two types of supply-side policies that we look at. Interventionist, where governments intervene with direct policies to increase potential output, and market-based, where the government enacts policies to lessen its influence on the economy and let competitive markets do their thing. Thinking back to economic systems, interventionist policies give the government a greater role in determining what gets produced, how it gets produced, and who it gets distributed to. So it sort of moves back that way towards the central planning idea. Conversely, market-based policies tend to let the market answer what, how, and for whom questions. One way that interventionist supply-side policies are used is to invest in human capital. An example of that is increased investment in education, such as has occurred in South Australia with the shift of Year 7 to high school. That increases the potential of the economy. On an ADAS diagram, we see all three curves shift to the right. Firstly, AD shifts to the right due to the injection of government spending into the economy when they do such a policy. And then when the presumably better educated young people start working in society, this will mean that the economy has better skills, therefore more productivity, shifting the LRAS curve to the right. Ideally, these enhanced skills, like the 4 C's, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, should mean a more adaptable workforce, lessening the prevalence of structural unemployment. The increased skills should mean that staff are now more efficient, which could lower the cost of production, shifting the SRAS curve to the right. It's important to note that although it's called the short run aggregate supply curve, here it's really the short run of the new long run. So the cost benefits to employers will not come until the long run when the better educated people enter the workforce. Okay, increased investment in healthcare also invests in human capital. So this has occurred in the US with the Affordable Care Act, or better known as Obamacare, where it gave people greater access to healthcare services. This can also increase the potential of the economy. We again see all curve shifts right. AD, due to the government spending that's involved. Then the healthier workforce brings extra productivity, shifting the LRAS to the right. This healthier, more productive workforce will be more efficient, lowering costs for businesses, shifting SRAS to the right. Another way that governments intervene to increase the capacity of the economy is by investing in new technology. The Australian government does this through the CSIRO, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation. One technology that has come from this is Wi-Fi. So this can aid the economy by essentially increasing the amount of resources available. We should know what this does to an economy. Of course, the spending on scientists, labs and materials will push AD to the right, well before any productivity gains are realised. The increase in quantity of resources will shift LRAS to the right, and with the increased ease and mobility of staff from being able to use Wi-Fi, this should decrease the cost of production for firms, which will of course shift SRAS to the right as well. Then there is infrastructure. So the South Australian government has upgraded the Darlington intersection to allow for a smoother flow of traffic. This investment adds to the capital stock of the economy and represents an increase in the quantity of resources, increasing the potential output. Again, the initial spending on construction project injects G into AD, shifting it to the right like that. And only on completion does the LRAS shift, and as well the SRAS, as there are now quicker commute times and less wear and tear on vehicles, lowering costs for businesses. Finally, there are business support schemes. These can help infant industries with some of their teething problems. An example of this was Japan providing assistance to its semiconductor industry in the 1980s. So subsidies and other preferential treatment allowed the industry to grow and eventually become a world leader. The subsidies lowered the cost of production, of course, shifting SRS, and induced much investment from firms when they invested in this new technology, and that shifted the aggregate demand to the right. Once the industry could grow, it could be seen that the LRAS increases too, as the economy has become capable of producing more than it could in the past. So we see, again, all three curves are shifting. Looking at the diagrams we've drawn, interventionist supply-side policies seem like they're pretty good, but there are some constraints. Firstly, what's the first curve that moved in all of these policies? It was the AD curve. So let's take the infrastructure project in Darlington as an example. That was started in April 2016. So that's when a lot of the money started getting spent, shifting AD. It then took 4 years before any supply side benefits were realized. In fact, you could argue that during construction, traffic flow would have been worse, increasing costs for businesses. But we won't show that here. The benefits only came upon completion, where we get the increase in potential output and lowered costs for businesses. Eventually, we get a reduction in price levels from the initial increase, but it takes time. So a constraint that we have is some short-term inflation. Yeah, there it is. Another constraint is the time lags. We saw how long infrastructure can take. That took 4 years. Well, think about investments in education. We've got the year sevens now going to high school. The rationale is that this will improve education for 12-year-olds, but how long until these 12-year-olds hit the workforce? That's a pretty long time. At best, 3 years until they get part-time jobs, but that's not what the government was doing this for. They're doing this about careers. So after the students have finished school and done some sort of post-secondary qualification. That means we're looking at around 8 to 10 years until we see any real benefits of this policy, and decades actually, until more than half the workforce has had this improved education. So very long time lag before we get the benefits here. And lastly, let's look at the cost of some of these policies. So the Darlington upgrade project, yes, it might have improved traffic flow. It cost $754 million. That is a significant opportunity cost there. Is that the best thing that we could have done with our money? Has that put government into debt that has to be repaid in the future? Has that affected our ability to borrow more in the future? The year 7 to high school, that's an ongoing cost. So the estimates are it's about $40 million extra across the state to educate these students in high school rather than primary school. Apparently, it costs more to educate in high school. And that's $40 million per year. So, and that's not including all the upfront capital costs. So all the new buildings we see at Glenunga, for example, and in other schools around the state, that's going to happen. So the costs are important. We're going to see in our next video where we look at market-based policies that they work quite differently, and their advantages and costs do match up somewhat. Okay, so we'll see that next time.